What's up, everybody? Kirk Cousins is a member of the Minnesota Vikings. All sorts of crazy stuff going on across the National Football League, and we are the Audible. We are here to talk about it with you. Matt Waldman jumping in because the free agency frenzy, it started on Monday, legal tampering and all. It's pretty much over for the first wave, but there's some interesting names out there. But let's start with the big one, the one fantasy owners want to know how it's going to take bloom. I was out and about for the college basketball tournament, doing some public appearances. Broncos fans want to know. Ran into some Vikings fans. They want to know. So let's set it up for fantasy owners. What is Kirk Cousins with the Vikings?
He's at least what he was with Washington, at least, because you got John DeFilippo, and I think he learned a lot in his stint with the Eagles. Obviously, you've got Stephon Diggs. You've got Adam Thielen. You've got a good offensive line. You've got Kyle Rudolph, Dalvin Cook, Laquan Treadwell, hopefully starting to come into his own. So Kirk Cousins can make do with that. And we can also remember that last year Cousins was playing with half or less of an offensive line for a decent stretch last year. So Cousins is a solid quarterback one. But what I like about this deal for Cousins is that, first of all, it gives him the best chance at winning a Super Bowl. Sorry, Denver fans. And he got a 3-year deal, fully guaranteed $84 million. So he took advantage of the way that Washington botched his situation. Washington could have had him for these next 3 years for probably $65 million if they just would have signed him 2 years ago. And he'll be 30. He'll be going into his age 33 season 3 years from now, which means he can get paid again. So I think he handled this. Kirk Cousins gets an A+, Minnesota gets an A+, and if Teddy Bridgewater becomes what we hope he'll become, maybe they'll look back on this as a missed opportunity, but the window is now, and I love the urgency, and I just can't wait to see. I mean, the NFC has really, AFC has been so boring. Brady, Roethlisberger, Manning, Flacco, Brady, Roethlisberger, Manning. NFC, it's an arms race, and that makes for some fun football.
Matt, do you have a new chair?
No, it's an old one. It used to be back there.
Okay, we're moving stuff around. Rookie scouting portfolio author Matt Waldman joins us. Also, the article up on the Ringer. I read that today, Matt, about new draft, all that sort of stuff. Before we jump into Cousins and all this stuff, let's go behind the scenes and just that interview that the Ringer did with you as part of that. Here's the new draft. Here's the draft Twitter. Here's these guys to follow. I guess they just titled it New Draft, right? Let's talk about that interview.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was more just a survey that they were doing of a kind of the draftscape, as I would call it, that's going on outside of corporate media that you often see with the NFL.coms, the ESPNs, and the like, so that they were interested in just seeing that. They looked around on Twitter and saw that there were all these new faces or faces that they weren't all that familiar with. So as I was approached, it was about new-ish. So I think I was the ish in the new, in that particular one. But they just talked about the dichotomy that you see with, what we call on Twitter, big draft, the big box corporate draft, and it's not meant in a bad way. It's just meant that, their audience and their budgets and the time allotments and all the things that they're allowed and not allowed to do, have a difference between folks who are a little bit more independent about how they do it, And so, folks like Mike Mayock or Daniel Jeremiah, or, even though Lance Zierlein was actually mentioned with us in that particular space, but folks who are working for the larger corporations, they have a great deal of knowledge, but they also have a great deal of tools at their disposal. But at the same time, they also have 3-minute budgets, that they can talk about things, and they're not going to be able to go into as much depth. So we talked about a lot of that, and how, and they in the Ringer did it in their typical, very pop culture oriented, savvy way about, how that differs and why would anybody want to study draft and, study film and put in the time to do that kind of thing. So it's a fun and interesting piece.
Fun and interesting free agency start. We've got to talk about Kirk Cousins with you. And Matt, from the angle of pressure, and not only the pressure on the field, we know that Kirk Cousins threw the most interceptions under pressure last year. And we'll talk about the fantasy lens, but also the pressure of y'all are 13-3 last year and made the NFC Championship game. If they don't at least get to the Super Bowl, if not win the Super Bowl, this has to be seen not as a failure. He's got 3 years, but as a disappointment based on what they were able to do, mostly with Case Keenum.
Yeah, this sets up really interesting as a great storyline about Kirk Cousins and the Minnesota Vikings, because a lot of Minnesota Vikings fans kind of have that kind of hangdog mentality that Vikings fans with a long history would tend to have, because of the fact that they've lost the number of Super Bowls that they've lost and some of the, defeat snatched from the jaws of victory that they've had until last year. So a lot of them even talked about how that they expected that kind of thing to happen last year. And then Case Keenum suddenly flipped the script on them, and they didn't really know how to react to that, even though they seemed to enjoy themselves a pretty good bit. I think they figured it out pretty quickly. But you look at Kirk Cousins and his issues with pressure, and he's always had those issues with pressure. He's been one of those guys that when you look at his game, even stemming as far back as Michigan State, is that he's a guy that I say that, how he regards himself is larger than his actual reality. And you like someone who is aggressive and reaches for the stars a bit, but he's one of those guys that on third down or in difficult pressure situations, he thinks he's got Brett Favre's arm. And he tries to unload these off balance passes that just don't fit. And he still does it, just doesn't do it quite as much. So as a Vikings fan, it could either play out, well, same old Vikings, here we are in the NFC Championship game, and Kirk Cousins has a wide open, guy, but doesn't really know how to handle that. Now he's dealing with pressure. Oh, and now he's going to try and throw this into, tight coverage into Kyle Rudolph, where there's like 3 guys in the area that don't have his jersey, or he can't reach it there. Or it turns out that we see the evolution of Cousins and see that with help around him, with a good defense, everything not having to be him on his own, that he's a perfectly good quarterback who can deliver strong moments for you and actually pull out a victory if you put him in position to win, where he doesn't have to do the impossible like a lot of these elite quarterbacks do.
Case Keenum with the Denver Broncos. I'm not going to say that I'm Keenumed out, Bloom, but after a 3-hour show Monday through Friday, Pritchard and Cecil on the Fan, it's like, okay, we've gone through all the angles. At the end of the day, Bloom, I can't help but see this as anything but a mediocre move, a practical move. They saved a bunch of money to not spend it on anybody. What, Tremaine Brock? And what are we waiting for here? So for me, it's something of, and by the way, this does not take them out of a quarterback for 5. That draft part needs to come into the conversation for everybody, Bloom, because the free agency process changes the draft. But I know a lot of people have speculated. I've gotten a ton of text messages from people, around the league, like, are they still going to go for a quarterback? Yes, that is in play. If they don't get Saquon Barkley and Case Keenum were used in the same sentence so many times at the Senior Bowl from people in the know, it would make your head spin. So if they can't get Barkley, and they may be aggressive enough to move up to get him, then it will likely be Baker Mayfield, Josh Allen at 5, Case Keenum with a 2-year deal. And by the way, speaking of 2 years, I don't think he's been released, but CJ, 2 more years, Demarius, 2 more years, Emmanuel, 2 more years, Derek Wolfe, 2 more years, Chris Harris, 2 more years. Do you get what I'm saying here?
Yeah.
Every single member of that core from Super Bowl 50 that's still left, except for Vaughn, has 2 years left. Case with the 2-year deal. Sounds like a window.
Absolutely to the window. And I think what we see is Kansas City's going through some changes right now. Patrick Mahomes, we'll talk about what Kansas City did for him, and you like it. But, this is a team that is still in a somewhat of a rebuilding or retooling mode. Oakland, I mean, we could do a whole show on just trying to read John Gruden's mind. I mean, through what's going on, it might not be that difficult. And then the fun team, I think, is the Chargers, just because they have the best roster in the AFC West without a doubt. But Denver, they have a lot of guys that have a ring on this team. They understand once they get to the playoffs how to do this, and I think Keenum gives them a window, at least more than any quarterback on the roster did. And Demaryius Thomas, Emmanuel Sanders, Adam Thielen, Stephon Diggs. Look, Thomas and Sanders are going to be worth a lot more than they've been in the last few years. And I think that Keenum is a solid quarterback. I mean, he's not going to elevate this offense. He didn't necessarily elevate Minnesota's offense, but he was able to unlock the value of what they had, and he'll be able to do the same thing, even if it is Devontae Booker instead of Saquon Barkley in the backfield.
Well, Matt, you're up. And by the way, is John Elway messing with the Browns? Because they like Barkley, maybe enough to take him at number 1. And also I've heard, and not just from talking to Scott McLuhan before he was hired, I'll be very clear on that, their favorite quarterback may be Baker Mayfield. Guess who John Elway's loving? So John Elway, once again, messing with the Browns, Matt.
It might be, but at the same time, maybe he's messing with himself too a little bit here on this. I mean, this is a difficult situation for the Denver Broncos if you look at where they are, because you mentioned the 2-year contracts everywhere and the possibility of this being a window where it's always dangerous. And John probably knows this as well as any quarterback who played until his geezer days, that when is it time to call it quits? When's it time to blow up a team? When's it time to say goodbye to the glory days and start anew? And when you look at this situation, Case Keenum is either that guy who's going to bridge them to the next player, whoever it is, and it won't be the guys they mentioned, I believe, that if they pick them up in this draft. I just don't think that they're the best quarterbacks on the roster. But that's just, that's still my long-term opinion, is that I still think Chad Kelly, if he can maintain what he's supposed to maintain.
I have some news on Chad Kelly. I've been very delicate with the way that I've treated it on the air. I'll do the same thing here. I'll tell you off the air.
Okay.
The best way I can put it is that there are some who are not as in love with Chad Kelly as much as Broncos fans are, and that's about the most I can say.
Sure.
It's been tossed around. Again, very delicate. Don't be surprised if he gets released.
There you go.
That's the first time I've said that. So I'm trying to frame it in the way that protects people, but that's
the
go back to Buffalo.
We like Chad Kelly. There may be people that don't like him as much.
There you go. Well, that's part of the political game at at this stage of it, especially with a player who's, really, a low end experiment at this point. So there you go. But when you look at this, still, when we talk about just the grand experiment of, are we in a window to compete for another Super Bowl, or is this the end? Do we really know the difference between the two? And I think Case Keenum is a nice hedge either way, because you get a player who's good enough to, if you have the elevated talent and they're ready to go, then he can support that. And if the talent is diminished, if the talent isn't quite at the level it used to be, then the investment isn't so high that you feel like that you can't pull the plug on that and start to rebuild and phase out some of these guys on 2-year deals and start to, bring in new blood and put in eventually, that quarterback that you do decide is going to be your future, whether it is Mayfield or Josh Allen or whomever that they have. Kyle Sloter. Oh yeah, he's in Minnesota.
So is Trevor Siemian now.
Yeah, Trevor Siemian. But yeah, I mean, the Broncos are going to be one of the most interesting stories of the AFC West because of that. Are we in a window, and are we right about that? Or have we gone off that cliff and didn't know it yet? And that breeze we're feeling is actually us hurtling off the cliff. And I think that that's where Denver is they're in that precarious position where it could go either way.
In a year or two, they'll be doing what Seattle did minus the franchise quarterback, because we won't know if Rosen or Allen or Mayfield or whoever is that guy. Bloom, let's get into the running back movement that we've seen again, knowing that the free agency plan for teams is going to change the draft. For some, maybe not as much, though, and I think that's where we need to specify here when we talk about Saquon Barkley at the top of the draft, specifically with two teams, with the Browns because they added Carlos Hyde. Let's go over that move, Bloom. But also with the Giants because they added Jonathan Stewart, a less attractive option than Carlos Hyde. Let's discuss those two free agent moves, and does it take the Browns or the Giants out of the running? I know with the Browns it doesn't. I believe it shouldn't with the Giants. How about you, Bloom?
It absolutely shouldn't with the Giants. I mean, that's almost absurd. I get Mike Shula and Jonathan Stewart. Hey, 3 yards per carry. You know, everything that Andre Williams wasn't will never be. I mean, it's gonna be an ugly
Zonka.
running game again. Well, yeah, it's gonna be an ugly running game again. And Jonathan Stewart is a placeholder. Although, look, Josh Norris on the couch just came out, made a really compelling argument that the Giants have to take a quarterback. I would say the Giants have to take a quarterback or trade down. You either take your quarterback here, and if you only zero in on one, or for some reason 0 of them, then trade down to somebody who needs a quarterback because somebody's going to pay for that pick. And that's the way the Giants should roll. I don't think they should use the number 2 pick on Barkley, and Jonathan Stewart shouldn't make any difference whatsoever. For the Browns, they may really like Barkley as much as some say they do. They can't know for sure. Look at him at number 4. They also could maybe even be trying to drive up the value of number 4 to somebody else, like you said, Denver, like a deal like what Chicago did to get Trubisky last year. Just hey, toss a 3rd and a 4th our way. Why not? We're going to get the player we want anyway because we don't really want Barkley. Hyde should not preclude that. Hyde's deal was similar to Latavius Murray's. Latavius Murray, now I know it was Dalvin Cook and it was the 2nd round, but it didn't stop the Vikings from trading up and getting Dalvin Cook when they saw him fall to the 2nd round, and it shouldn't stop Cleveland from taking Saquon Barkley. Cleveland's got to take the long view. Look, John Dorsey has to hit on these picks more than getting the best positional value or getting a player who fills the biggest hole. Hit on the picks. Get cornerstone players. You get your cornerstone quarterback, and you're going to get maybe the first non-quarterback off the board. You cannot miss on these picks. If Barkley is the player who makes you feel like, I know we're not going to miss on this pick, take Barkley.
Matt, the Browns are becoming very interesting to talk about, so let's discuss this running back issue. And then, of course, the Giants there, as Bloom mentioned, going in the direction of Josh Rosen or whoever. And Rosen could do, not necessarily, I don't want to use the word attitude adjustment, but just from, a teachable moment, a guy that needs to perhaps be more open to teaching, as we've heard, behind Eli Manning. So maybe Rosen at 2 would make sense there. Also, with such a great running back class, and we're going to get to plenty of draft talk on this show, so nobody out there worry about that. But with such a great running back class, Rosen in the 1st round, and then Sony Michel in the 2nd round, the next LaShawn McCoy, whatever you want to call him, I think these things make sense. It's a very deep and talented running back class. How much do these free agent moves impact what these 2 teams could do at the top?
I mean, I think for the Giants, from a running back perspective, I think it does very little. I mean, Jonathan Stewart is just a serviceable player who can give you, from a run pass perspective, what that team's looking for in terms of understanding the scheme and being able to fill in and be a pro's pro, regardless of the yards per carry and whether you like it or not. That's kind of the standpoint from the coaches of what they're getting from him. And I can understand that, but that doesn't mean that I think for me, they're going to look at this and say, okay, it's a quarterback, or, in the 1st round. I think that makes total sense to do because, Eli Manning is getting older, and you look at what they have with Odell Beckham Jr. If if they like someone from this class enough, then I think it is a quarterback in the 1st round. I think that there will be a team that just falls in absolute love over Saquon Barkley and has basically, they'll be so obsessed with him that they'll be willing to get him. And if he falls, past the teams that are expected to get him, like Cleveland or, the Giants, then we're going to see a team trade up for him. I think that we'll see something that, on that level of love. But there are so many good backs in this class, and it's nice to say, oh, Todd Gurley was the best back of the 2014 class, or the 2015 class. It was 2014 class. He's the best. I would say he was by far the best back of the 2014 class. But 2 years ago, everybody in the fantasy football community was questioning whether or not he was a good running back, whether he was actually that talented, whether he actually,
he's Trent Richardson.
Exactly. So when we look at it from that perspective, we have to understand that the value of running back doesn't need to be that high. It's just that the running back captures the imagination of even the most jaded fantasy analysts who talk about how running backs don't matter, then you bring up Saquon Barkley, or you bring up somebody that they like, and you think that they're the guy that's like, oh, she's not that pretty. And then she walks up and wants to ask them out on a date, and they completely lose their,
Marbles.
their marbles. Exactly. So it's one of those deals where if the Browns take Barkley, I think it would be, I think that would be an interesting experiment, because on the one hand, here we are talking about Isaiah Crowell, and people saying, well, he's not a good back. And, he had that great offensive line around him, and he still couldn't get it done. And you're thinking, well, was the offensive line that good? Was it, or, was it performing that well? Were the game scripts good enough for him to be able to get it? If he was so bad, how come Duke Johnson didn't just outright take the job? And some people would argue, well, he was good and he did great, in spots. Well, I think there's still enough debate with that running back depth chart, that offensive line, and that entire team, that people who are like, Saquon Barkley is going to be our savior, Reggie Bush is going to be our savior. I remember talk about that. Darren McFadden's going to be our savior. We've heard this over and over again about running back play. You can wait a while on running back. So I hope the Browns have figured out a quarterback that they really like, identify one or two of them that they feel like are really good fits for them, and they're aggressive in getting them, and they can get arguably as good or better of a back, or a back that won't make that much of a difference, when it comes to their surrounding talent, whether, when compared to Barkley.
The Audible Live here, youtube.com/footballguys, DOTCOM. Make sure to subscribe to our channel. Hit the little bell so you get an update and a notification when we go on the air on Thursday nights. So, Bloom, all of us fans of Dion Lewis. Lewis is now with the Titans. Bit of a head scratcher or no?
Oh, not a head scratcher at all. And I think that the New Orleans Saints show the way. You can have two running backs that can both catch the ball and run, and can both provide big plays, and you can keep defenses off balance. Now, Lewis and Henry are a little more towards the polar opposites than Ingram and Kamara, although they're different backs. But absolutely, look what you've given. Look at the deck of cards now you've given Matt LaFleur to work with. You've got Delaney Walker. You've got a good offensive line. You've got Corey Davis. You've got Rashard Matthews. You've got Taywan Taylor. Maybe you'll have Michael Crabtree. Who knows? Although I think Rob Moore, who coached him at Oakland, I want to say someone told me today that Moore didn't like him and actually wanted him on the outs before Del Rio and the whole staff got swept out. Anyway, my point is that now you've given Matt LaFleur a la what happened in his last stop with the Rams, or what happened when he was the stop before that with the Falcons, where you have this variety of elements. Again, two-back backfield in Atlanta. So you have this variety of elements. You use formations, personnel sets, motion to create problems for the defense, matchups that they can't handle. And I really want to see the NFL move towards more of lining up both of the backs, maybe not in the backfield at the snap, or maybe not in the backfield when they first set up the formation. But the idea of having two running backs on the field, two players classified as running backs, because Dion Lewis, I'd be fine with him lining up in the slot. I think it's fantastic. I think that they can both be a la Kamara and Ingram, who were basically running back ones for most of the second half of the year last year. So maybe not to that extent, but running back twos with running back one upside any given week. In Tennessee wins, Henry maybe gets 18 to 25 touches in games where they have to get in a shootout or play catch up. And maybe fewer shootouts this year too, much like the Saints defense came along. Let's also add Malcolm Butler to this picture. So Butler and Logan Ryan, we'll see if Adoree Jackson comes around. We know they have good safety play there. So, this is fun because Jacksonville is really setting the tone in that division. Of course, Houston's going to get back to Sean Watson. At least they've shored up the offensive line a little bit. And now Tennessee has some fun things going, and Mike Vrabel said a lot of the right things when he was hired. So I think that Tennessee is giving Matt LaFleur the pieces that he watched some great offensive minds turn into tremendous offenses the last 2 years.
the Titans situation may not be as tricky as some people think, but Matt, I think there was a Derrick Henry hangover where fantasy owners like, finally, I get to see him be the man. No, you don't. And I also want to say this and pick your brain here, Matt, because every day I get to pick the brain of Mike Pritchard, our friend of the show, first round pick, all these sorts of things. And in talking about the need for a third corner, he said, well, actually, in positionless football and where football is now going to the middle of the field. So gone are the days of Dion taking away, and that was his teammate in Atlanta. Dion taking away half the field. Take away half. We'll just go attack that linebacker that can't cover. The way this game is transitioning now, less from the outside and more to those Texas routes, to what the Patriots do with jerk routes, with the running backs or with wide receivers who, look like running backs, Julian Edelman, what have you. So let's discuss that in this as well, and how Lewis can really fit that new wave of the NFL that teams like the Saints are well within.
Yeah, and also we can just look at this and go, well, where did Mike Vrabel play? Where did Mike Vrabel grow up as an NFL professional? And you look at Dion Lewis and you say, okay, that fits very well. He knows what we're going to want to do to an extent. And where's LeGarrette Blount? Oh, wait a minute. We have LeGarrette Blount. He's just a little younger. He's a little quicker. He might actually be a little more powerful. We already have that guy on this roster. So it's really, to me, not a Saints situation. It's more of an old Patriots situation or a recent Patriots situation with this particular team. You're going to have them kind of pick their spots with how they're going to use both of those guys, just like the New England Patriots did. And Derrick Henry is now LeGarrette Blount in this offense. And, it's going to be interesting to me if they do pick up another wide receiver or if they go with Tajay Sharp, who apparently has been working out pretty well and is excited. They're excited about his return kind of quietly from what I've heard, that maybe he'll be able to show a little bit more than what, that he did not last year, but 2 years ago during the preseason. And, there's a little bit of quiet hope around him. But when you look at this team and what they'll be able to do, I mean, this is a multiple team. You can already see that with Delaney Walker as the H-back. You already see that with Dion Lewis and what he's going to be able to do, splitting him outside. It's going to probably be, how do we do things with motion to set up where the easy mismatch is? And it fits Marcus Mariota very well, because Tom Brady, I've always talked about Tom Brady as being the ultimate task-oriented quarterback, as a guy who you give him, he's unbelievably prepared, but you give him specific tasks that he's got to keep an account of. And as long as you keep him in that realm of the task list, he's going to be one of the greatest quarterbacks you've ever seen. You throw away the task list, or you set it on fire, or you spill coffee on it, and he's going to be yelling at his offensive coordinator, saying things that kids around America parents will never want their kids to hear. But he's not someone that, you knock him off his spot. You try and, foil his game where he has to improvise, and it's not a good thing. And Marcus Mariota, to me, is that kind of player. As fast as he is, as much as he can run well in a straight line, when you ask him to actually be an improviser, it's not very good. He just is a very athletic, task-oriented quarterback, and that's not a bad thing. It's just that's how he is. So to me, I think the Titans are going to be more along the lines of the Patriots. How do we use motion and shifts to kind of set up give Marcus Mariota a very easy read, and then try and make sure that we can execute that. And we have the athletes to be able to do it. And I think Dion Lewis gives them enough of that multiple oriented look, along with Delaney Walker, along with Jonnu Smith, if he can develop another year and turn into the type of player that they saw promise with. And that gives them some of that flexibility, and then they can kind of put their own spin on it, because Tom Brady other than skipping around in the pocket as well as he does, ask him to actually gallop and he's going to trip up and fall down. When you have someone like Marcus Mariota, you've got someone who's Tom Brady with a rocket booster attached to his butt. So if he needs, they can do designed runs with him that actually create a little bit more of a interesting multiple look that we've seen, at least even with Malarkey, with the run oriented looks that they did. a lot of that stuff worked. And I wouldn't be surprised if Vrabel looks at that and not, if he really is truly a Bill Belichick school guy, he won't have the ego to go, I need to reshape everything that happens in Tennessee. He may look and go, I like that. Let's keep that. Let's keep this. This stuff worked. This stuff didn't. And then we'll, incorporate it in. But as we've seen, unlike Bill Parcells, who fathered a tree of coaches that have been fantastic, none of Bill Belichick's coaches have, off of his tree, have been ripe fruit.
Yeah, the buzz of what were we going to say, Bloom?
I was going to say that I want to just mention, because folks know that Dion Lewis has been a favorite of mine going back to Pitt, and we've seen him at a certain point be written off for having too many injuries, just not being able to be trusted. And when the Patriots turned him into one of the best running backs in the league for half a season, and then he went down with an injury right after he signed a ridiculously cheap extension with them, see Dion Lewis, and even last year, didn't come back all the way from that injury. See Dion Lewis, by the end of this past season, he won me, and I'm sure many others, fantasy championships in Week 16, and he came all the way back. And in his press conference introduction today, he got choked up, and he said it's good to feel like people believe in you, and we forget sometimes that this is like so. See, we talk about this. We've been talking about this going back to the draft guys days and why we love the NFL draft so much. So much is, we're like parsing these numbers. Oh, they overpaid him. Oh, what are they doing? These are real people's lives. And so many people around them are pouring so much into these careers and have been since they were children. And to see Dion Lewis show a little bit of that, it's something that we don't see enough, I think. And it was just great to see him kind of having that moment sink in. And you really see how it almost seems like sacred to him when he said, like, I got to make it right, that he wants to deliver, that it's not like I made it, I'm great, I'm going to go buy my Maserati or something like that. It's that I'm going to show them that they were right to believe in me.
It is the Audible Live, and Bloom, I'm excited about Jerick McKinnon with Kyle Shanahan. Are you?
Yeah, absolutely. How can you not? I know there's been a few people invoking Joe Williams. Well, he was just excited about Joe Williams. All right. But I think he knows what to do with him. I think that we've seen Jerick McKinnon every year go a little bit more from athlete to football player. And we saw that last year. I think short yardage running sometimes was surprising. Obviously, he's a good receiver out of the backfield. This 49ers team continues to bloom, if you will, before our eyes, going back to those 5 games with Jimmy Garoppolo. And I loved signing Marquise Goodwin. Now, if you look at Marquise Goodwin's deal against the backdrop of all those free agent wide receivers deals, they did fantastic. You've got Pierre Garçon coming back. Trent Taylor's a nice piece. George Kittle's a nice piece. They're not done yet, I don't think. They were in on Allen Robinson. So I think this is terrific. I wouldn't be surprised if Jerick McKinnon flirts with, 70 receptions, 60, 70 receptions, 1,200, 1,300 total yards, 8, 10 touchdowns. And, we'll see. And I don't think it's the last move they're going to make in this backfield. I mean, Matt Breida was a nice nice player they got for free, basically. But he and McKinnon are a little redundant. I do think they need a heavier back also, and there's plenty. So in this draft. So this is going to be fun. And the nice thing is, you can see in the NFC, the Rams and the Eagles, it was just like this past couple of weeks leading up to free agency. You just wait a day or two, and the Rams or Eagles are going to do something brilliant. But then, they're the front runners, but then there's the 49ers, and they've got a plan just like the Rams and the Eagles do. Maybe they're not right up there at the head of the race setting the pace, but things change fast in the NFL, and we're feeling those plate tectonics in motion. And while some may look at Jerick McKinnon, and this is another thing as an aside, a top 5 running back money means nothing. That means nothing because the top 5 running backs, other than Le'Veon Bell, are still on their rookie deals. David Johnson and Ezekiel Elliott and Todd Gurley, they're all still on their rookie deals. So that doesn't mean anything. Oh, how could they pay Jerick McKinnon top 5 money? If you look at what they're going to get tactically for their $7.5 million a year, and you look at other players that got $6, $7, $8 million a year in free agency, like Josh Klein for the Titans, nice solid like replacement level guard, then yeah, Jerick McKinnon's worth that money for the extra advantages he gives you, for the value he adds to his touches, for the versatility he gives you in play design and play calling. Absolutely. So throw all that stuff about he's not a top 5 contract. That doesn't mean anything.
That's the get off my lawn stuff, really. And the salary's going to go up. By the way, look at all the teams that had all this money. And then look at the free agent crop that wasn't as robust because of the trade tsunami, because of these trades going down. Like, okay, it takes away from potential of free agents. And you saw that this year. Matt, let's discuss Jerick McKinnon and how he fits in your eyes with Kyle Shanahan.
Well, I think the real get off my lawn question is whether or not he wears a headband. I think that that's probably the one that we need to really be wondering about. And, but that's another topic. When you look at Jerick McKinnon, I think that Bloom brings up a good point about the tactical nature of it all. And we often look at the stats and emphasize, well, look at what he has or hasn't done, when actually you should be looking at, well, what is he and why is Kyle Shanahan interested in him? And when you look at, his receiving skill and you look at the jump cut agility, the ability to play in a zone offense, the speed, I mean, this was one of the best athletes in the draft when he came out. And a guy who was, a quarterback at high school who converted a running back at Georgia Southern, but played in an option offense. When you look at his play and you look at all the other running backs in the NFL, there's no there's no other player like Devonta Freeman other than one, and that's Jerick McKinnon. When you, not from the stats standpoint, but from the actual way that they play, what their strengths and weaknesses are. When you look at Jerick McKinnon, he has excellent balance. He's got great short area quickness. He has great agility and footwork, and it's something that I think that Shanahan looks at him and says, this is Devonta Freeman on the rise. Like, if we can get him to be the guy we want him to be, we want a Devonta Freeman in this offense. Because I understand that he may catch a million passes, but I actually think that when you look at the size, the dimensional orientation of both of these backs, the physical dimensions, and what their strengths and weaknesses are, while Freeman is, to me, the much superior back, Jerick McKinnon has been coming on, and I think that they feel like that he could be a real good fit there. And if they do bring in another back who is McKinnon's superior in terms of running between the tackles, then yeah, they can kick him out and he can be that pass catching back as well. But unlike Tevin Coleman, where you look at the Coleman Freeman duo, I think Coleman, while he's developed as a player and he's at the point where I think you could feel like he's going to develop into a good running back and could be a good fit in certain circumstances, I think that if you had to put Tevin Coleman into Devonta Freeman's role in Atlanta, we would have seen disappointment. He wasn't the same level of player. Maybe last year it wouldn't have been as much of a drop off, but the first 2 years, I don't think he was nearly as ready. And I think that he's looking at this and going, I don't want such a starkly different player as my backup if we do draft another guy. And if the guy we do draft doesn't work out, I want a guy who can give me that Devonta Freeman type of player, because, you just look at that. He might be the best outside zone back in the league right now.
Sammy Watkins to the Chiefs, Bloom. How interesting is that, given that Tyreek Hill's already there, Travis Kelce's already there, Pat Mahomes, the gunslinger, he wants to go downfield. Can Sammy stay healthy enough to produce and play up to that contract?
It's worth the risk. I mean, one of the things we need to keep in the back of our minds when we see these signings is that free agent cap room dollars is one of the most abundant resources in the NFL. It's not worth much. A free agent dollar, especially because the kinds of players that generally leak through to free agency, it's sometimes you can spend and barely improve your team. You don't want to be building your team through free agency. Dave Caldwell and what Jacksonville did with their defense is a rare exception, and he give him a tip of the cap. And I'll bring him up right now because they signed Andrew Norwell. And Andrew Norwell and Sammy Watkins were two of the first signings to be announced. And they were a little bit of a surprise in the sense that people look at free agency the same way they look at the draft and say, what are your needs? Who are players that can fill those needs? But there's another way to look at free agency or the draft or team building and say, make strengths stronger. Give opponents questions that they can't answer. And leverage the assets you have to maximize the value of those assets, amplify what you have. So you can think of this in baseball. They've been doing this for a while with these projections, like Pacoda projections, things like that, where it's value over replacement, or VBD, Joe Bryant, tip of the cap to Joe. The idea of the value over the replacement level player. So where you already have players who have a gap between their level of play and the replacement level of play, add players, coach, add schemes, plays to increase the value of that, like a megaphone. So Sammy Watkins increases the value of Patrick Mahomes' arm and playmaking ability. And for that matter, unlocks more of Tyreek Hill. Now you're going to put safeties in a bind. And Travis Kelce. Again, we talk about, like I talk about, like a wrestling hold. So you have this three-way hold where you're pulling a pass defense in three directions with Sammy Watkins, Tyreek Hill, and Travis Kelce. And especially to win that division, you've got to beat Denver. You've got to beat the Chargers. You know, the Chargers just signed Casey Hayward to an extension. Jason Verrett, knock on wood, can come back healthy. You know, they had Trevor Williams and Desmond King. You know, they've got a good secondary. They've got an amazing pass rush. How are you going to win that arms race? Likewise with Andrew Norwell in Jacksonville. You know, you already have this powerful offense. And we can talk about Allen Robinson as a separate aside, but I like making strengths stronger. And I think that you can look at the Patriots and, you know, what they've done as an example of not just trying to make a perfectly balanced team. I don't think that's how you win Super Bowls.
Make strength stronger, but make sure you don't just stick with the glamour muscles. Can't skip leg day, Matt Waldman. The Bears don't have much to flex about, but now with Allen Robinson, Taylor Gabriel, and Trey Burton on their way to the Windy City, how's Mitchell Trubisky look in year two, and how do these weapons respond?
Well, I mean, I think that he's probably looking in the mirror about right now and feeling like that he did a whole good bit of sets on leg day, and he's probably flexing and looking at them right now and feeling pretty darn good. But at the same time, I think he's also looking at a mirror where maybe he mistook those legs for the guy who just, you know, deadlift, you know, probably, you know, I don't know, about 800 pounds and forgot that wasn't him. But because there are a lot of unproven guys here. I mean, yes, Taylor Gabriel somewhat proven. Allen Robinson, we can talk about how much we loved his season 2 years ago. I guess there's still going to be questions about whether he's really proven or not. I thought he had a season for the ages 2 years ago. So when you look, and Trey Burton, really a nice player, because there's a lot of things that you can do with these guys. So now you're looking at, you know, Tariq Cohen, you know, Howard, you've got Shaheen.
Yeah.
And then Cameron Meredith, is he coming back? He might be back, maybe not. Kevin White, we don't know. So, you know, everything behind all that might be gravy, but the players that you can motion out, and Cohen, you know, with Shaheen, with Burton, now you can play a lot of mind games with these defenses with what they're doing in theory. It's just a matter of, are they going to be able to create a cohesive offense around this? And if they do, I think the weapons make a lot of sense. And I think that Trubisky held his own pretty well as a rookie, as we expected. So it is promising. So it may not be his legs he's looking at, but I think that, you know, he's training and heading in the right direction. And I think that if Allen Robinson can continue to catch the ball and stay healthy, he's finally found his guy that he's going to be able to really work with. But I think Burton is probably the one I'm most excited about of this group, just because of the flexibility that he provides. Gabriel, to me, I like him, but I think that teams tend to look at him and say he's a speed guy, doesn't run routes all that great, but I think he runs better routes than you'd expect. I thought Sarkisian did a horrible job of using him last year. So it's fascinating. And I'll just say this, Patrick Mahomes with Sammy Watkins, I mean, as much as we love Tyreek Hill and them talking about Tyreek Hill being able to go up and win the ball, they talked about all that all day long in camp, all camp long, that he could go up and win the ball and make those tight plays. Did we see that once with Alex Smith? I don't think we did. I think that, that may happen with him this year with Mahomes, because Mahomes will, basically say, oh, there's a hole in the needle. Let me fit it through there. And let me see if I can do that. So he's going to try that. But I think that from a schematic standpoint, that's where Sammy Watkins is going to come into play. And then you're going to have Tyreek Hill really terrorizing the underneath level of the defense. And they'll kind of switch it up where they can kind of do one of both. But I think that you see these one-on-one matchups with Sammy Watkins with the cornerback, and Patrick Mahomes is going to be like Xavier Rhodes. I don't care. Yeah, go ahead. We're going to throw this up for Sammy Watkins. I'm as long as Sammy Watkins doesn't have any nagging I'm out of practice foot issues this whole summer, I'll be taking Sammy Watkins in every draft this year, because he could have, I think he will have a career year with Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes might throw 20 interceptions this year, but he'll throw 28 or 29 touchdowns, and I bet that half of them go to Sammy Watkins if Sammy Watkins is healthy, because I think this guy's been waiting to bust out and be in a situation where he can work with someone who isn't afraid to throw the ball and whose coach isn't afraid to throw the ball.
Chiefs Bears conversation accurate, because I want to ask about Matt Nagy, Matt, and who he makes Tyreek Hill. Does he try that with Taylor, in your eyes, real quick?
Does he try that with?
Does he try to make Taylor Gabriel his Tyreek Hill in Chicago?
I think he'll give that a shot, but I think if he's smart, he'll make Tariq Cohen is Tyreek Hill, because Tariq Cohen can catch the ball. Just go back to week 1 against the Falcons and some of the deep shots that they were trying to throw his way, and Glennon just wasn't quite accurate enough. But if you go back to his North Carolina A&T days, man, what he could do down the field as a receiver was really exciting, and I wouldn't be surprised at all if the Tyreek Hill becomes Tariq Cohen.
Sigmund, why don't the Packers want to make Aaron Rodgers happy? Not only the Alex Van Pelt move, which has created friction. It's Jordy Nelson move. All right, we can talk about him getting older, not being the same player. He wasn't very good with Brent Hundley. Nobody really was, I guess, Devontae Adams, right? But let's discuss this Nelson move to the Raiders. Packers washing their hands, Raiders getting rid of Michael Crabtree, but mostly, the Packers side of things, the Raiders side of things, now that Nelson is going to be wearing silver and black.
Yeah, since we're getting close to the end of the hour, time flies when we're having fun. I do want to step in, and because it's the off season, I feel free to do this. Just that my original sports love, I never went to school. My mom, rest in peace, thank you so much, Mom. I never went to school on the first Thursday and Friday of the NCAA tournament. Never. My teachers even knew that I wasn't going to be at school on those days. And it's been fun today to watch Houston back for the first win in the tournament since Phi Slamma Jamma. I know you guys remember Phi Slamma Jamma. Tremendous 30 for 30. And they had a game-winning layup that was something to behold. And Loyola Chicago, who won, this was the 1963 national champions. I think they're back in the tournament for the first time since the 80s, the Ramblers. And y'all gotta look up Sister Jean. Their 98-year-old scout chaplain. She's the chaplain, but she actually creates scouting reports every day for the coach. Back when he was hired as an assistant in 2011, the first thing he found on his desk was scouting reports from her about her play. It's fantastic stories. So it's been fun. It's been a fun day. What'd you say, Matt?
There's a joke in there somewhere for Sister Jean with our show.
Yeah, there is. We need. Where's our Sister Jean? Pray for him. No, look. The Jordy Nelson thing, you're right. And, we've seen some stuff with Cleveland where it sure feels like there's been some personnel moves to send a message to Hugh Jackson that he's a figurehead at this point, or just it's hard to see the consistency between the moves with Hugh Jackson still being there. And you wonder about Mike McCarthy, or now the new GM, Gutekunst, and this idea that it's not Aaron Rodgers' team. I mean, now we got the Kirk Cousins deal, so at least Rodgers is going to get an extension. But I agree, and I'm not sure that Jimmy Graham I mean, look, Jimmy Graham, Jordy Nelson, big skilled receivers who can't separate at this point. Aaron Rodgers can make do with both of them, and I understand the idea that sure, Jordy Nelson was productive with Aaron Rodgers last year, but the perspective that Aaron Rodgers created that value, not Jordy Nelson, and that's fine. But that's Jimmy Graham at this point too, So I don't quite understand that. If you're taking the money from Jordy Nelson and using it to sign Jimmy Graham. That being said, I think that much like when Brett Hundley came in, we saw Jordy Nelson's value shrivel up. I think we're going to probably see it shrivel up in Oakland. Although Derek Carr, look, when he was at Fresno State, he did a really excellent job. We're going to pull this all together with Devontae Adams, right? Those back shoulder type throws that Aaron Rodgers does so well. There were a lot of those throws that Derek Carr made to Devontae Adams and let Devontae Adams win the ball in tight quarters. And I think that maybe Jordy Nelson can still win some of those contested balls or small window balls. But I think also you're asking the big story, the 500-pound elephant, whatever. I'm mixing my metaphors. But my point is it's Amari Cooper. This offense is going to go as far as Amari Cooper can take them, especially if Jordy Nelson is the number 2, because Michael Crabtree's gone. And we'll see where Michael Crabtree ends up. Brian Grant failed a physical, just mysteriously failed a physical after he was going to get $14.5 million guaranteed from Baltimore. Maybe that has something to do with Michael Crabtree being released.
I think either that or they realize, what do we do? We're paying Ryan Grant. Now I'm mixing things. We're playing Ryan Crabtree. What are we doing? Change the contract. Matt, what the hell are the Ravens doing?
Well,
let's get John Brown. Let's get Ryan. I love Ozzie Newsome, bro. You know that.
But Ozzie Newsome, he's admitted already this year that they can't pick wide receivers. He's literally admitted that at the combine, that we've had trouble picking wide receivers. We just don't. I mean, he didn't say we don't know what we're doing, but his quote essentially was that we have trouble. We've historically had trouble picking wide receivers. He's admitted to that. So yeah, I mean, you look at it and go, same as it ever was. That it was kind of fascinating how that goes. But when you look at the John Gruden taking Jordy Nelson's situation, just look at the history of John Gruden as a coach. Jerry Rice, well, let's bring him in. He seemed over the hill. Let's bring him in. How that worked out. Oh, Joey Galloway, let's bring him in after he's already had a long career. Antonio Bryant, let's bring him in and see how that works out. He likes a veteran receiver who he feels like that he can rely upon, who can deliver whatever it is that he thinks, that guy's traits have. And so, I mean, I can understand why he's thinking what he's thinking. It's going to be interesting to see if it works out from that standpoint with Jordy Nelson. But yeah, I mean, with the Ravens, I mean, you look at the scenario and, it's just, you just look at this and think, well, until they get a quarterback who actually may be a little better than Joe Flacco, and they stop trying to go, I think they look at Joe Flacco and go, we need to throw bombs. We just need to throw the ball down the field. We need to, that's what we need to do. And let's just pick players who are only known one-dimensionally to do that. And it's been kind of crazy that all these years, for years and years and years, they've picked special teams guys who are great return specialists, so receivers, or great vertical guys, can't run a clean route in between the hashes to create easy opportunities for themselves. Rashad Perriman is the quintessential wide receiver for that, who could not run routes in the middle of the field very well and created harder situations for himself. And, speed, that's great that he has speed, we could talk about him being big and fast, but as we've seen over the years, I mean, there's a great YouTube video I've talked about over the years where a wide receiver coach shows two of his players. One is a guy that was like a 4.4 guy and another one who was a 4.7 guy, and showing how much faster the 4.7 guy looks when he runs routes, because he actually knows how to run the routes as opposed to the 4.4 guy. So I think that the Ravens just, they need some consultation on how to pick a wide receiver. And I think that it's really weird that a former Alabama All-American wide receiver, is, his team underneath him isn't able to figure out how to do that. And maybe he needs to maybe he needs to bone up on some things and dust it off and like take a, more of a close up, magnifying glass look at how his guys are doing the evaluations there and get more involved in that. Or maybe, if he is involved, find someone else who's get involved in that level and just go, I can't pick him, just in the same way that, you look at Brian Billick's and Scott Linehan's and a bunch of other offensive guys who were known as offensive gurus to become coaches, and then their offenses stunk. So it's funny how we look at guys who are known for something, and then they end up getting the opportunity to be in charge because of what they were famous for. And then what they're famous for is like the worst possible thing that they field as a product.
John Elway can't draft quarterbacks.
Magic Johnson couldn't coach. So, I mean, it's interesting how that works. And are they stuck on thinking that they can? That's the other question.
Very good. Questions that will be answered. And in celebration of the college basketball tournament, Bloom, I don't have Longhorns or Orange. It was Orange Men when you were there, but whatever.
Yes,
Orange. Yeah, whatever. But I do have the Golden Eagles. Let's see. I'll make this a little less man booby. Golden Eagles with LCCC, where when I was there and was playing basketball, we didn't sniff any sort of tournament.
Yeah, and what about really quick before I forget, because we don't talk linebacker. What about Leighton and Vander Esch played 8-man football in Idaho? Is that right?
I know. I talked to Chad Greenway about that at the Super Bowl, who also he played 8-man. 8-man confused me. 6-man is where it's at, baby.
You need to write the quintessential article on like translating from 6-man football to 8-man football, and like why you can excel 6-man, but 8-man's a whole different thing.
It's a totally different game. But just wanted to say, don't forget the community college basketball teams out there as well. Anyway, having some fun. Watching the tournament, and of course having fun talking football with you all. So for the great Matt Waldman, RSP.com. Matt, how is that? It's the time of year where things run together for you. Because are you sleeping? Enough, Matt? What's going on there?
Yeah, I'm sleeping, but it's like, the calendar on my house is January, February, typing, April. And that's basically what's going on right now is that I'm in the typing dark month, so it's going fine. We're about halfway through, getting started on the third of the fourth chapter to write probably after this show.
Matt Waldman, RSP.com. Order your rookie scouting portfolio today. Bloom, I love in the background when either Matt or I are talking and I see you smile and talking off camera, and I love to see you smile. I love that Kate makes you smile so much.
Yeah, always, every day. And it's good to smile. It's good to feel good. And Matt Waldman needs a ride. He can't find his car keys.
Still can't find the car keys.
My office aided, I think. I will hopefully.
Okay, there we go. It is the Audible Live. He's Matt Waldman. He's Sigmund Bloom. I'm Cecil Lammy saying thanks. Stay tuned and, well, stay frosty.